Hi! Today I'm going to show you how to make this diamond-shaped beaded earring using a technique called brick stitch. The beads I'm using are Miyuki Delica beads in size 11. The needle I'm using is a beading needle in size 12. The beading thread I'm going to use is called Fireline, and the weight of this one is 6 pounds. I like this thread because it gives a lot of structure to your piece. Additionally, I have a pattern I'm following along with, which you could find on my website, and there are links below. When you're following the pattern, you go back and forth with each row. This is how we build our rows. And I like to put a piece of paper down so I could just focus on the line that I'm working on and I don't have the distraction of the rest of the pattern. Okay, let's get started. So to begin, you're going to want to cut about a 4 to 5 foot length of thread and thread your beading needle. And then we're going to pick up the first 2 beads in the row of the pattern. So in this case, it's a black bead and then a silver bead. And I pull those down towards the end of the thread. Make sure you leave about a 3 to 4 inch tail at the end. And then I'm going to take my needle and come back up through the first bead, making a little loop. So I pull that tight, and you'll see the beads are now sitting next to each other. And then I'm going to come down through the second bead and pull that tight. And because this is the first 2 beads in my row, I want to repeat this process so the loop is extra strong. So back up through the first bead, and then back down through the second bead. And pull that tightly. And now I'm going to pick up the next bead in my row, and this time I'm going to come down through the last bead I added. And then I'm going to come up through this new bead. And I won't repeat that this time. I'm starting to have a little ladder. I'm going to pick up my next bead and come up through the last bead. And then down through the new bead. And pull tight. And we have 4 beads now. Now we're going to pick up another bead. This time we go down through the last bead. And then up through the new bead that you just added. You want to make sure there aren't any gaps in between these beads. Make sure you're pulling it snugly because this is our foundation row that we're going to build the rest of the earring on. So I picked up another one. I'm going up through the last bead and down through this bead that we just added. And we have this. We're going to keep adding beads in this way. This row actually has 25 beads. So you just want to keep following along with the pattern. I know it can be tricky. It's a pretty complicated pattern to follow, but it's so pretty when it's done. So, just try to stick with it. Silver is what we just added. And you just keep building in this way. I don't want to bore you with watching me add all 25 beads. So I am going to go, you are going to keep beading, and you are going to join me back here when you get your 25 beads done. And then we're going to learn how to start a row of brick stitch. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you have completed that row of ladder stitch and you have a snake looking thing like this now. You'll notice if you look at the tops of the beads, there are little thread connections between each 2 beads. We're going to call these thread bridges. And we're going to pick up the first 2 beads in our next row, and we're going to slide the needle under the second thread bridge, the second thread bridge from the outside, like so. And we pull that through. And when you get it through, your beads are going to look a little wonky, but that's okay. Here, what I like to do is turn my beadwork so that I'm holding it in my non-dominant hand so that you're always working away from the non-dominant hand. It makes it much easier. So now you're going to take your needle and you're going to bring it up through that second bead that you just added and pull that. Still a little bit wonky, but we're going to fix that. We're going to go down through the first bead. And then we're going to come back up through the second bead. And everyone will sit perfectly like they're supposed to. Okay, take a look at that. Pull that tight. And now everyone looks beautiful. So for the rest of this row, we're just adding beads one at a time. So I pick up my next bead, I slide under the next thread bridge, pull that through, and then I bring the needle back up through that bead, and that's it. Now we add the next bead, and we do the same thing. Slide under the thread bridge, pull it through, and then come back up through that bead. You want to just go slow here so you don't end up with knots and getting your string caught on things. And I'm going to add another one, same technique. Under the thread bridge, back up through the same bead. Now we're going to continue the row exactly like this, adding one bead at a time, and then you're going to meet me back here. And when you meet me back here, we're going to go over starting a row again one more time. So don't worry if you didn't get the hang of it the first time, we're going to do it again, and you will get the hang of it, I swear. It's probably the trickiest part in brick stitch, just starting the row. And the only reason I use this 2-bead technique to start a row is because it hides the thread so it's not exposed on the outside of your brick stitch. Okay, so finish up that row and meet me back here and we will start the next row. Okay, so here we are at the end of that row, and now we're going to start a row of brick stitch again. So we pick up 2 beads, slide the needle under the second thread bridge from the outside, and pull that through. It's going to give you some wonky beads, and you're going to switch it around so you're holding the work with your non-dominant hand. And then you take your needle and come up through that second bead you just added, up through the second, down through the first, and now back up through the second bead. Pull that, and then everyone will be sitting exactly how they should and where they should. And from here on out, you just continue adding 1 bead at a time like you did in the previous row. And then you're going to meet me back here when you finish that row, and I'm going to show you how to end a thread and start a thread. Okay, so now I'm going to show you what to do if you need to end a thread and start a new thread. So the first thing is do not let your thread get so short that you have nothing to work with. You want at least 4 or 5 inches, and it's also best if you could end your thread at the beginning or end of a row. So I'm going to take that needle and come down the neighboring bead from where I just ended, and I'm going to go down about 2 rows and then make a couple loops. So here I am, I've come down 1 row, and I'm going to come down another row, and then I'm going to come up through the neighboring bead. So I'm going to make a little loop around these 2 beads. So I'm coming up through that one, down through the original one, and I want to loop around these twice, which is going to give me tension to keep anything from unraveling. So back up through this, and down again. Okay, and then I'm going to just weave it down a couple more rows before I clip the thread. I use wire cutters to clip fireline thread. I find they're the best because it is a tricky thread to cut, but you could cut it with any sort of sharp scissors. So here I'm grabbing my cutters and then I'm just going to clip that. And now I will show you how to start a thread. So you're gonna cut your length of thread 4 to 5 feet. Again, try not to make it too long. I find it's easier to work with a shorter thread as a beginner. And I have threaded my needle and I am finding a place close to the edge of where I'm going to start again. So I know where I ended and I want to begin at that same place. So I have picked a spot about 4 rows down. I'm going to do that same looping technique to create tension that we did to end the last thread. So here I've gone down and then I'm coming up. I'm going to make this loop. I'm going to be careful that I'm not going through the same place where I ended the other thread because it'll just be too many threads inside of that bead, which could cause it to break. So here I am looping. I'm going to do 2 loops here and then I'm going to head up towards the top. It's also important to know if you are ever trying to put your needle through a bead and it's really hard, then just stop and see if you could find another route to go because these beads are made out of glass and they will break, and it is so heartbreaking when one breaks after all that work you've done. Here you see I just pulled on the thread and I could see that it's not moving anywhere, but I'm going to go through one more time just to make sure. And then I'm going to start to work up to get to that starting bead. So I'm going to work up the side of the, come up the edge of the work. So here we go, we're almost there. I've worked my way over to that outside edge of this little pyramid. And I keep going until I reach that first bead. And now that I'm here, I can begin my row just like any other row of brick stitch. Okay, so now we're going to add a loop of beads, which we will use to add the ear wire later. I have finished my pyramid here, down to the last 2 beads, and now I'm adding 6 beads, and I am coming down through the neighboring bead to the one I just came out of. I'm being careful not to get tangled up in my thread. It's always better to go slow and not have a knot. And now it's going to look like this. And then I'm going to come back up through the bead I started from and make a loop. So I go up through those, back down. Don't be afraid to turn your work around so that it's easier to work with. I think that's really important. So I'm coming back down through there. And now I have a loop. Make sure it's nice and tight. And then I'm going to loop that again. So back up. And then down. I had the tail of my work sort of got stuck in there. So I'm going to go back down through, and then I've completed 2 loops. Once I'm through there, I am going to weave my thread. down into my work and do the little neighboring loop-de-loop thing that we've shown you, and starting and ending a thread, and then that will create enough tension that the loop will be strong. Now, if you've seen some of my other videos, you know normally I like to use a wire guard. In the case of these earrings, I literally just didn't have a silver wire guard, but I think it's also good for you to learn how to do this method as well, because you know, if you're getting started, you don't want to have to buy too much stuff. So you don't always have to use a wire guard. You can make a loop with your beads like this. And so here I'm just ending the thread. You see the little neighboring loop-de-loop tension technique that we've used before. So I will do that and clip this thread, and then I will also take that little end tail there, and I will thread that needle and weave it back into the work so that that is out of my way as well. And then when you've done those two things, meet me back here and I will show you how to start the bottom half of this little pyramid. Okay, so to get started with the bottom half of the pattern, I'm going to refer back to my pattern sheet, and you'll see we completed the top half. Now we're doing the bottom half, and you're still working back and forth across the rows. And don't forget the technique with covering up as you work. I personally like to flip the pattern upside down because I like to work up as I'm working, which is how when you're weaving, you're working up, so it makes more sense for me to look at it this way. So to get started, you're going to thread a needle with thread, and you are going to start about 3 rows down from the corner where you are going to start the pattern. And this is why it's important that you make sure your pattern is lining up to where you're going to start this section. So I am doing my little neighbor tension beading trick to keep my thread in place. I'm going to loop around those 2 beads 2 times. I'm pulling, you see that's nice and strong, and now I'm going to work up to that outside corner where I am going to begin brick stitch. And I think you could probably already see that basically it's just like working brick stitch before, but we are starting it in a new place. So once we get up to that corner, you will see that there are thread bridges just like you had before. So here I am in the outside corner, and I am ready to start a row of brick stitch. I pick up the first 2 beads in the bottom half of that pattern, make sure I'm working the right direction, and just continue on as if I was working any other sort of brick stitch. Easy peasy. So you keep working that, and I will see you when you get to the blue. Okay, so here we are at the blue section. There's nothing to show you here, no techniques to teach you. It's just I get really excited when I get to this part of the pattern because it's easy sailing from here on out. We just continue to add blue. And really, like, make this pattern your own. Add red, add pink, whatever your like favorite accent color is. Next, we are going to add an ear wire. So I am using these little, they're called French style ear wires. And normally I use a pair of needle nose pliers to open them. But I just want to show you that you don't have to have a pair of needle nose pliers with these. You can easily open it with your fingernail. So I don't want you to have to buy equipment that you don't necessarily need unless you really want it or you have it, right? So you open that up, you slide the ear wire through your little loop you made earlier. Make sure you get it in the center of that group of 6 beads, and then just squeeze it shut. Make sure you squeeze it really hard. You don't want any space in between that little ball and the wire, because then your strings could slip out, and that's the worst. I also recommend using earring guards. You can get little plastic earring guards that go in the back of these when you wear them, because otherwise they could simply fall out, and you don't want that to happen. But look at this, you did it. You should be so proud of yourself. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for sticking around, and I hope you really enjoyed it and you have a gorgeous pair of earrings that you feel super proud of. If you liked this video and you want to see more, I hope you will subscribe and join me again. Also, please check out my website, snailsandfairydust.com, or my Etsy shop, Snails and Fairy Dust UK, where you can find lots of patterns and tips and tricks and fun stuff. See you soon. Thanks. Bye.